Please welcome on stage Cameron Adams, co-founder and chief product officer of Canva, Markus and Daniel Markus from Future Weekly.
Thank you very much for having us. That's lovely. You're good?
I'm good.
It's not bad. Like, the front row is quite good. The middle part is like, I'm not quite sure. And the back is, where the fuck have I ended up? But I'm not sure yet. That's going to be a fun session. You good as well?
I think I'm good. Yep, my mic's on, now I'm good.
Lovely. You as well?
All right.
That's a nice, intimate setting we have for podcasts, right? Like the two of us, you and our best 400 friends.
Have you done podcasts with 400 people before?
Every week. No, it's the first time.
All right, first time for me as well. First time to be doing a podcast 6 hours after Mozart and Strauss were playing as well.
I hope no one's here like by accident going like, when are they going to start with the music? But it might happen. They're going to say, look at all these lovely young people interested in culture.
If you get me a piano, I can play you a bit of Mozart.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you were more like a DJ type.
I do. On my office, I have one side is all my vinyl and the other side's a piano. So 5 minutes between Zoom meetings, I do one or the other.
Really? That's pretty impressive. I looked you up on that. And anyhow, so we're happy to have the podcast with you. First of all, we will have Slido running, and we'll have a look at it once in a while just to see what kind of the questions are that we come up. We have, however, a very traditional way of starting this podcast. Actually, podcast episode 278. So we've been doing it for a while. It also kind of started with the pandemic and kind of grew on us. Not quite as exponential as what you guys and girls do, but still, there we are. And what we usually do is we actually go to LinkedIn to look up who the person is we're talking with. Because, you know, on LinkedIn, obviously, people just write the truth, and the absolute truth. And
I hope you found the right profile, because there is some unsavory Cameron Adamses around.
No pressure on me, right? But it actually just says Cameron Adams, co-founder and chief product officer at Canva. Is that right?
That's me.
Good man. Now, and I'm curious, I mean, within here, like, everyone knows what you do, but I'm assuming you travel a lot, and if you're sitting in a taxi and someone says to you, so what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
I definitely don't tell them I started Canva. I will probably just say that I work at Canva, and if it goes off into an interesting conversation, I might drop what I actually do at Canva later.
Wait, and just say, oh, by the way, I built it. And they go, you did what? Oh, how do people react to that when you say, well, I actually built that?
Normally they're pretty excited, and often they have their own Canva-Story, which is always great to hear. They'll be like, oh, I designed this thing last week in Canva, it was amazing, it helped me throw the best party ever, or whatever their story is. Hearing those stories is what really fuels my continued passion for Canva and for empowering design.
Now, funnily, I mean, we all have that Canva story, seemingly, and mine is a bit weird because, like, for years and years, I'd been trying to learn Photoshop, and I was just absolutely crap at it, until someone said, have you heard of Canva? I said, no, what's that? He said, well, basically, it's Photoshop for dummies. And I was like, that sounds about right for me. So I kind of like that approach. Is that like your typical Canva story you hear initially, or what do people tell you there?
No, I don't think a lot of people have used design tools before, and that's kind of the beauty of what we wanted to do with Canva, was really bring design to people who hadn't thought of themselves as designers or even thought that they needed design in any way. And often people will want to do this particular thing, like create a poster in the office, or they want to create their first pitch deck, or they want to create a resume that really catches people's eye. And they'll go to Google and they'll type in the job that they want to do. They won't necessarily type in Canva, but they'll type in, make a great poster, or what does a great pitch deck look like? And we've done a lot of great work to get those people from Google to somewhere on Canva. And they end up designing in Canva, and they discover how easy it is to make something great. And that's when they discover what design is, what being a designer means, and the power that a tool like Canva can give them.
I like that. And maybe one last question I have before Markus is going to join in that conversation. I mean, we both talked about our kids early on. And I'm assuming your kids sometimes say, so Daddy, what is it what you do for work? What do you tell them? How do you explain to them what you do?
They know what I do because they come to the office quite regularly. My daughter is probably the school's greatest Canva ambassador, so she's constantly getting the other kids to stop using other software and using Canva. And she's a great advertisement because her presentations are always the best ones. So yeah, they know we've always tried to involve them as much as possible. And I think it's also the culture of Canva that kids are in the office quite frequently. We have great social events. My son loves the pinball machine in the office. So they've always been hanging around. And particularly, like, my daughter is 12 years old. Canva is almost 12 years old. So raising them as kids and raising a business has been very much, parallel happening at the same time. And I think if you're a startup founder, you just have to include your family in it.
I like that.
So you're one of the most successful startups worldwide now. You just mentioned how, just in random conversation, you see how your own work actually touches people's lives and how fulfilling that is. But going back to the beginnings of that, what happened before Canva? And how did you get to Canva?
So before Canva, there were some dinosaurs, and this big comet came over, big explosion. Eventually ended up with me at university. I did computer science and law, neither of which I was very interested in. I was actually more interested in working on the school newspaper, the university newspaper. So I ended up as a kind of a part-time graphic designer, and that really captured my imagination. I left university, totally forgot to apply for any law jobs, so I just kept going with my graphic design and turned that into a business, actually. I ran my own design agency, which is just me and like a random contractor I'd pull in every now and then. And I made websites for a while. Actually, one of the websites I made was for Atlassian. I don't know whether you kind of know them in this part of the world, but they're another big Australian tech company. And I did that for 6 years, kind of built up my small business. And at the same time, I was doing a lot of writing online. So blogging was still a thing there. Does anyone know what blogging is anymore? Yeah, a few people. I had my own blog. I wrote a couple of books off the back of that about JavaScript and other nerdy things. And wound up kind of getting on the radar of someone at Google. And this is Google in Sydney in Australia. And they were looking for a designer, kind of a techie type, to help them out with a product called Google Wave, which was a communications product that pretty much none of you have heard of, but it was very forward-thinking, very pioneering. This was 2007. Slack had just a twinkle in the eye of someone. People were still, using ICQ and MSN Messenger and stuff like that. And Google Wave was a new take on collaborating, kind of merging email and docs, and it was super exciting, but it ultimately didn't work out. I joined their team, worked on it for 4 years, and we ran it as a startup inside Google, which comes with its own whole learnings. Anyone who works at a corporate and is trying to, drive innovation inside a corporate, I can talk to you about that for hours. But I learned a ton because I'd moved from web design now into product design / product management, and really cut my teeth there at Google. Made a ton of mistakes. Really fortunate. I think if you can find a place where you can make a lot of mistakes, that is a great place to work. And that's what I did for 4 years. Google Wave kind of died. I almost got sucked into Google+. That was a bit of a bullet that I dodged. And potted around inside Google for 6 months, couldn't find something that I really wanted to work on that I would have a deep impact on. And then decided to leave Google with 2 other engineers, and we started another startup called Fluent, and it was focused on email. We didn't quite learn our lesson. Google Wave was trying to replace email. We tried it again, but slightly more modest. And we built a great product, and we learnt a lot from our experience on Google Wave, but we weren't great business people. So we had the product. We actually had quite a few users trying to knock down our door to get on the wait list, but we couldn't afford to bring them on because it was really expensive to bring them onto our servers. So we went through this whole fundraising round. We traveled from Sydney to San Francisco. We spent 2 months in San Francisco, traipsing up and down Sand Hill Road, doing 40, 50-odd pitches, getting knocked back all the time, getting all these random connections that you had to go talk to. Got so close to pulling together a funding round, and it fell apart at the last minute. And I came back to Sydney. We didn't have any money. We couldn't afford to bring anyone onto our product, and we were wondering what to do. And that's when I got an introduction to Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht, who are my co-founders on Canva. I didn't know anything about them at the time. They had just moved to Sydney from another city in Australia called Perth. And I got an introduction to them through my old boss at Google, Lars Rasmussen, who was actually one of the founders of Google Maps. And he said, go talk to these two. They don't know much about technology. Give them a few tips, see what you can do. And I went and talked to them, let them know about HTML5 and JavaScript, which were hot at the time. And Mel told me about her idea for Canva and what design should be, how to democratize design, and how we could take design to billions of people around the world. And my background as a technologist and a designer, it just really clicked with me. So we ended up going in together, the three of us, starting Canva, and that was 2012.
So there's lots to roll up on here. But before we go in there, because I already see you have a few questions there, but it somehow feels like a puzzle magically coming together, because in some way you feel like the perfect co-founder for that, with your experience of, on the one hand, having an agency beforehand yourself, so you know the creative process, but then also the Google experience, where you know how to build products also on a larger scale, and then coming back, failing with the first startup, not being able to raise money, having that experience. Did you feel it's kind of destiny that this happened?
I mean, in some regard, it's destiny, but every story is destiny. And every startup story is just a random happen chance of luck and timing and opportunity. And I think you can look at Canva as this one moment that suddenly came off. But as you said, there's like so many moments before that failed, that just didn't work out. In the previous 15 years, I'd worked with countless friends who look like great founders, but you get together, it doesn't quite work. They get a girlfriend and disappear, and they stop building the product with you. All sorts of stuff happens that just doesn't work out. And it's that one moment where it does work out that becomes the headline. So yeah, it kind of is destiny, but it is also just throwing yourself at the wall so many times over until you find that right combination of people, idea, and timing, and then it magically works.
I'm curious. I mean, it's a spectacular story. I like the way you put the destiny part of it. It sounds very good. So Canva's your destiny, we just heard. That's a very dramatic way of putting it, but I like it. But I went to the internet before we had this conversation and Googled you and was looking for podcasts and found an interesting podcast, which you'd done. And that's usually where people get nervous. You know, what did you find on the internet? And
Safe search on?
I never use that. So I'm always like, show me the good stuff. No, anyhow, and I heard in a podcast, I hope I'm right on that it said that your father initially had a computer store, and that's where you kind of grinded your teeth into the first lines of code, and that he actually also wrote a piece of code in DOS back in the day. And I'm curious, how did that feel going into this computer store and the first touch points you had with these, let's call them cumbersome, not very nicely designed things, where you have to put this very rudimentary code into it? How did that inspire you, and what was it you saw in it?
Well, you have done good research.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, my dad did run a computer store and a software company, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but it was a bit of a wonderland of opportunity, because not everyone had a computer, and definitely not everyone had a powerful computer. So being able to go into the store, try the latest software, cut open boxes of games that I could load onto my computer and then quietly seal up and put back on the shelf.
I was going to ask you that, how you did that.
Yeah, it's like a really sharp razor blade and some really invisible sticky tape.
Oh, you're a smart guy.
Yeah. But yeah, it's amazing as a kid, and I don't think, often as a kid you don't realize the opportunities that you get given, but just, I hate the term, but being digitally native, like just being in computers and inherently them being part of your life, I think that was a huge opportunity for me. It wasn't until much later on that I started coding and poking around behind the software and behind the computer and figuring out how it all worked. But having that real comfortableness with technology, I think, really played a huge advantage for me.
And I'm just curious about one specific point, because for me, the first time I saw DOS and the first time I saw Photoshop both felt the same, meaning I sat there and was like, let's do stuff. How? And I just felt absolutely and utterly lost, when the C / whatever it's called, and I just had no idea what to do. It was absolutely non-intuitive. As I felt around Photoshop as well, it's like, oh, I have a lot of ideas, and I was like, how does that stuff work? I'm curious how maybe the early DOS days also maybe in some form or function shaped you the way you design products nowadays.
I think we've approached it from very different angles, because DOS to me was a window into a whole new world.
Really?
As was Photoshop. I had an old version of what they used to call it, Electric Cat. That was like the code name for it, and somehow I got a copy of it. And again, a whole new world opened up. So like DOS was the technology world, Photoshop was the design world, and for me it was just, there's so much opportunity and undiscovered things and things people had never done before. Like every keystroke you're putting in was something that no one had tried before, which was really exciting to me.
And how did you end up studying law?
I got good marks.
I mean, you're talking with so much passion. You're like computer science and design. Your eyes spark up. You're like, yes. So you went on to become a designer, but first you studied law.
My mum's a first-generation Chinese woman, which basically means that you either need to become a doctor or a lawyer. So to make her happy, I said I would go study law.
And is mom disappointed that you became an entrepreneur now?
She was pretty disappointed for a while until I got my job at Google, and then she's like, okay, I have a decent son now. And after I quit Google, I think she was heartbroken, and it wasn't until Canva started taking off that she's like, okay, I'm pretty proud of you now.
And that's kind of good for mom then. And that's kind of the missing link I'd also like to understand, because you kind of said, okay, so you made your website, you wrote a blog, a couple books where you just like, as you do, like a couple books, and you ended up at Google. Yeah, but probably something happened in between. It's probably not that you just went like, boop, and Google said hello and done, but how did you get across, like, I mean, you're in Australia, and suddenly you're in the middle of the valley area with Google. What happened in between?
A lot of networking, and I think networking is probably underrated. Well, I don't know. Some people love networking. Me as an introvert, I hate networking. So like coming to a thing like this and talking to 500 people individually over small glasses of orange juice, terrible. But they're really valuable, and like getting yourself out there, and I think finding your people, like people that you truly connect with. I think if you view networking as just shaking hands and getting business cards and finding opportunities, terrible idea, but actually finding people that you connect with and who you can build stuff with, incredibly important. And for me, that blogging period was actually really important for me, because it opened up a whole new community for me. So I was in Melbourne, Australia. I was working for a mail order software company. I was doing their software catalogs, and being able to explore on my website, put out experiments, write about them, and have people talk back to me with their new ideas or their thoughts on what I should do with this thing was really important. And it totally broke down the world for me. I hadn't been overseas as an adult for about 6 years, and the internet, blogging, finding my community of web standards people who were just discovering the internet was super important. I met people from Florida, obviously from San Francisco. I visited someone here in Prague, London, UK, like people all over the world. And when we got together at places like early South by Southwest, conferences like Web Essentials, Web Directions, App Media in England, like getting together with them was so exciting, and so many great ideas popped out of it. And that ultimately led me to meet a designer who was working in San Francisco, and he was actually the first UI designer at Google. And he recommended me for the Google job, which got me into Google Wave.
Thanks for that. I love that story. Do you want to take over?
Let's get back to the beginning of Canva. So you met your two co-founders, and you said they didn't have a lot of ideas about the technical perspective, so that's where you came in. And nowadays you have 130 million monthly users.
135.
135. So
sorry,
my
Ben. We
information
updated the metrics.
my information is already outdated. So what happened in between? How do you get to that point?
And may I just ask, launch day was also quite special for you, right? The night before, the evening before, you had a little bit of a tingle-tangle with the car?
Yeah, launch day was pretty hard. So we started Canva in 2012. We had no team. It was the three of us. It was kind of two of us, me and Mel. Cliff was running their old business for a long time, and he's our operations guy, he's hiring, he's a whole bunch of things. But in those very early days, it was just me and Mel figuring out the product and like what we wanted to build. And took us about a year to build the product. We found an office, we hired our first few engineers. That was a whole process of like finding the right engineers to work with us and really come on the journey with us. Pretty much all of our first 10 engineers are still with us over 10 years later. So that's a real testament to the passion that they have for the mission of Canva. And yeah, we built the product over the course of a year. At the time, there was this philosophy that was really popular called Lean Startup. I don't know if you remember that. Not many people talk about it anymore. But a book had come out called Lean Startup. Concept of Lean Startup was you just throw together some crap, get it out to people as quick as you can. Like 1 week of prototyping and you've got a product that you send to people. And lots of our investors were telling us to do that. They were like, just get your idea out in whatever form it is. You don't have to be proud of it. Just get it up. And we were like, no, we know what we want to build. And we need to build a product that people can actually use and are going to love using. So we took our time to build it. Investors were hounding us all the way. But we finally got to this product that we actually enjoyed using ourselves and that we knew customers would get real joy out of using. Didn't have to be every person in the world. We weren't going to drop the product on some salesperson in Egypt and expect them to be able to use it. But we found a real strong niche with social media marketers. They were just emerging. It was 2012. Instagram was just growing then. Pinterest had become a thing. And visual content had become really important for this particular set of users. And to Daniel's point, they were terrible at design tools, or they hadn't even used them before. They hadn't even considered themselves visual content creators. And Canva unlocked that for them and enabled them and empowered them and made it possible for them to start creating amazing visual content for social media. And they were our very first users. They were our very first users before we even launched. We did a lot of testing with them. We made sure the product made sense to them, that even the onboarding flow really led them into becoming a designer. Because lots of people were fearful of design. You would put a design tool in front of them and they would freeze up. They'd see a blank page and be like, I do not want to mess up that blank page, so I'm not going to add a text box or an image or anything. So we worked a lot on our onboarding process for people into the software to actually get them to add that very first thing and to realize that they could do something they couldn't do before. And that was a real unlock for us. To your point, 2 days before we launched, we had a whole bunch of press lined up. And that's one thing we've done quite well over the years is like get press on board, line them up, have them tell a story and go into the launch with that. So we had all this press lined up for a Tuesday night. We had TechCrunch, Pando Daily. Does that still exist anymore? Probably not.
Not sure.
ZDNet, which has kind of gone through resurgence. A couple of other press outlets. And they were ready to press go. It was Saturday night. We were getting the product ready, making sure it was all polished and ship shape and all the bugs were out. It was 8 o'clock at night. We were in the office and I decided to head home. and I ride to and from work on a bicycle. So at 8 o'clock at night, I was riding home down probably one of the steepest hills in Sydney, and doing about 40 kilometres an hour, this taxi pulls out of a side street, doesn't see me, sees me at the very last second, slams on the brakes, way too late. I hit the bonnet and hit the road and blacked out. And I woke up dripping blood onto the road, and a bouncer from a nearby pub had come over to stop traffic from running me over. And I couldn't speak. I was all cut up on my face. He managed to get my phone. He actually called Cliff, one of my co-founders. Cliff came around in his old van, picked me up, took me to the hospital. They stitched me up, and I needed to go back the next day and continue coding.
As you would, right? Now, is it true that he was initially calling random people from your phone, just trying to figure out who you were and if they kind of knew who you were?
Yeah. He eventually landed on Cliff, which was fortunate.
Here's a dude lying in a puddle of blood. You know him. Or how did you do that? Any idea?
I think I managed to somehow, through sign language and telepathy, managed to communicate. I needed Cliff, and he got him.
Still in contact with the bouncer?
No, never saw him after that night, but I should probably go and give him $10.
You might as well buy him a beer one day and say, dude, thanks for that. I mean, I have no idea how your co-founders must have felt. And the other thing is, like, the grit and determination after blacking out, having that severe accident, probably a decent concussion and whatnot, and to be back in front of your computer, your workstation the next day, that's brutal.
Well, it's the beauty of a deadline, and when you've got a press embargo 2 days away and they're going to hit send that night, you need to make sure that the product is going to work for everyone that signs up or doesn't sign up, as was the case.
It's a mad story. Like, if people say, I can't go to work, I injured my finger, you were like, yeah, I got hit by a car and it was back to yesterday, a day afterwards. Wow. Now tell us, so you hit the launch button, boom, and then you get your first visitor, and then your second. Talk us through that.
It's, I think we always talk up launches, and I think for us, launches have become more important as we've grown because you have more of an audience that's ready and waiting. So we have 135 million people now, so when we launch something to the homepage, you can be guaranteed that a lot of people are going to use it. But when you're launching your very first product, you have 0 people. You might have a wait list, but even then, most of the people on your wait list don't actually care about you. The email that you send to those people is going to go into spam. 5% of them are actually going to open the email. 2% of them are actually going to click on the button inside. So you'll probably end up with about 5 people from your 10,000 person wait list that actually end up signing for the product. And that is exactly what happened with our first few launches, and especially so with that very first launch. We had a bunch of press lined up. TechCrunch, TechCrunch is the seminal technology site that you want to get written up on. And I think we got about 500 referrals from TechCrunch that actually signed up. It was pretty small. And those are the numbers you're working with in the early days. You need to take those 500 people or the 100 people that come from your wait list and turn them into passionate users. And that's why we focus so much on the product, because when they get into the product, they need to want to use it the next day and they need to want to tell someone else about it.
How did you do that? And then jump in. I mean, it sounds so easy. I mean, you just say, well, you have to turn on the number and that's all good. But how did you do that?
You build a good product.
Yeah, okay, that's easy. Okay, next question. No, but seriously, but what made that product so good in hindsight that they saw that value straight away, that they stuck?
Well, it was definitely the effort we put in. So that year that we spent building wasn't wasted time. I think we inherently love the product itself, and we use the product day to day. Someone just asked me, how much do you use Canva? And of course, we use it every day. I probably use it, 2, 3, 4 hours a day itself. We do everything in it. And I think for us, that's a huge advantage for us. Because if you're building a product for someone else, it's really hard to know what they want, know what the next feature should be, to iterate quickly, to roll stuff out, roll it back, do experiments, all that kind of stuff. It takes a long time if you have to go ask someone else for that. But if you use your product, if you are the best user of your product, It shortens your development cycle incredibly and gives you amazing insight into what you're building. Of course, you need to listen to other people. You can't just listen to yourself. But building a product for us and our team gets us like 75% of the way there, which is a huge advantage.
Okay, that's mega.
I think we've also, we really focus on quality. The experience that you give people in a product is magic, really. Like, I'm sure there's products that you can think of that give you a delightful experience, that make you feel like a superhuman. And doing that for every person that uses Canva is our goal. And we think about that experience every hour of every day. And that's exactly what we did before we launched.
Was there a moment when you knew now is the right time to launch, now this product is good enough?
It was really hard. There were definitely things we wanted to have in the product at launch that didn't make it in, and there were some rough edges. But when we started seeing people get really excited about that first usage of Canva, so when they came into the office, we sat them down and we said, design a poster. And they were like, I can't design a poster. And then they just started using the product and they got super excited and you could see their eyes just lighting up. That was the moment when we're like, okay, it's ready to launch.
And another thing you said before about your early, the first target group for your product, you said the social media managers. How did you find them? Because I think what we see with lots of startups, and there's also one startup now that Daniel and I are supporting, and they're applying machine learning to video cutting, and we're discussing what's this first audience, because there's so much possibilities, so many different ways you could, so many different target groups that could benefit from it. But how do you hone in, how do you focus on this one that is really the right one for the beginning?
Yeah, so our mission is to empower the world to design, which essentially means every person needs to use Canva, which is a terrible target market to have because you run into that exact problem. And I don't think for the first 6 months, I don't think we knew who that target market was, other than us. Like, we're going to build a product that we like. As we started bringing people in to do testing, that really started to hone who got most excited about it and who is going to derive the most value from it. So if you can get someone from nothing to having a huge amount of value, that's an easy sell. Like, it's easy to convince them to sign up and to continue using the product. And through some of those user testing sessions we did, we noticed that people who blogged got really excited about it, and people in the social media world. And at the time, those often coincided. So social media people also blogged a lot. We actually had a lot of blog articles after Canva launched about how awesome Canva was, and that drove a huge amount of our growth as well. But yeah, I think you need to start large and spot the opportunities and head towards where the opportunity is, because you're not going to build a product for 1 billion people on day one. You need to find that real beachhead first and start growing out from there.
Go for it.
So then you said, okay, TechCrunch brought 500 people, and generally there wasn't this big wave immediately. How do you deal with that? Because in some way, I don't know, tell me if it's different, but it feels like in some way underwhelming, and you probably doubt yourself whether that will really work. So how do you deal with these feelings, and how do you actually get then to the point where you say, wow, this is really working?
Well, yeah, TechCrunch didn't bring in much. Actually, one of our best channels was a DJ mashup I did that got to the top of Reddit one day. And I checked my web stats randomly, and 1 million people had visited the site the previous day.
Shit.
And I was like, oh, I should put an ad for Canva on that. So we actually got like 10,000 people from that. But you just need to kind of find how you can grow, and particularly how your product resonates in terms of the different growth channels it has. Product-led growth, I think as it is now termed, which wasn't a phrase 10 years ago, was how we kind of seeded with those very vocal initial users. And I think we're very lucky that bloggers and social media marketers love talking a lot, and they love talking about what they're doing, what tools they use, giving recommendations to people. So they were like the ideal first customer I think you could have. it slowly grew, and I think it reached a point where word of mouth doesn't quite cut it anymore. And about two years in, I think, we actually crossed paths with a guy called Andre Penantuan, and back then it was called a growth hacker. Now, I don't think growth hackers are a thing anymore, it's just like growth. And he had really great ideas about how to more strategically grow the product and do it other than word of mouth, and particularly about search engine optimization. He really unlocked for us the idea of jobs to be done, and particularly how you guide people from a search engine through to having a really great product experience. He did a bunch of research around keywords, what ranked highly, what lots of people were searching for, how that intersected with what Canva could actually enable them to do, and created a bunch of content that people would find through their Google search and would get them into starting a Canva design. So a great example of this is Poster Maker. A lot of people search for Poster Maker, and they would have ended up with lots of random results. We started creating content on Canva landing pages which spoke to that job. Here's how you create a poster, here's a great tool for doing it, here's what a great poster looks like. And that got us to the top of the results. And when we became number 1 for Poster Maker, that was like champagne moment for us. And he created a whole ecosystem of that. So he did like poster makers, business card creators, Halloween invites, birthday invites, like a whole web of content that spoke to the jobs people wanted to do and connected them through the search engines to a Canva experience. And we knew that once they started creating a poster or a birthday invitation, that they would have a great time on Canva, and they would love it. So that was like the part we'd already done. He connected us with people finding the great product.
It's an impressive story. Just thinking how that must have felt when you kind of have these assumptions and you say, we think this could work, and suddenly you probably have some metrics board, I'm assuming. We're looking at metrics and suddenly you're seeing, hang on, this seems to be working. Holy shit, this seems to be working. Oh fuck, this seems to be working. I'm assuming there must have been like an oh fuck moment when you suddenly saw, this is not like an okay-ish thing, but this is really picking up.
I think in metrics growth, there's not really an oh fuck moment because
Okay, fair enough.
It is so gradual. Like the first week, I think we added 1,000 users. The second week, 2,000 users, and then it kind of just gradually grew from there. And if you look at the timescale of 10 years, so now we add like 10 million people in a month, it's huge, but the path to getting there has been 10 years. Like it's a long time. And every week it just slowly grows up. So, you know, you're doing 500 this week, 600 the next week, 700, you know, exponential growth grows. So there's no moment where you're like, wow, this is crazy. It's just grown over time. For me, the oh shit moments are actually very humble. Like it's this one moment where you suddenly realize something that you hadn't noticed before. For me, the first, wow, this could actually be a thing moment was an email that we got from a user in South America. And this was probably 6-9 months in, maybe a year. We got an email from South America, and it was someone we had never heard of. It wasn't friends, wasn't family. It was someone in a country I had never visited who spoke a language that I couldn't speak, and they had taken the time to write to us and just thank us for creating Canva. And what was even more powerful was that this person actually used Canva for the orphanage that they run. And they created newsletters in Canva for the orphanage, which featured the kids that they were trying to find a home for, helped those kids ultimately find a home. And like, Canva plays a very small part in that, but the fact that we can help that person get that amazing job done was mind-blowing to me. And it was mind-blowing for 2 reasons. Someone far across the world was using our product that we had never talked to, we hadn't marketed to, they had just found it and they'd found it incredibly useful. So like that reach around the world was amazing. And 2, that type of impact that you could change someone's life through design was amazing to me. And that's probably been my biggest oh shit moment.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it kind of leads me up to the headline, "Be a Force for Good," where we heard it. And probably going to tell us a little bit about that. But what I like so much is the 2-step plan which you share there, which shows a bit of the magnitude, the way you guys and girls at Canva tend to think. It says step 1, and I'm just thinking, like, if like a young entrepreneur would come to me and say, look, I'm about to build a pitch deck, and you say, okay, so what's your strategy? And they were to show me this, I'd tell them, that's ambitious. So, here goes. They say, I mean, you do have 135 million users, so fair enough, but step 1 is, I believe you'll manage it, but still. Step 1 is become one of the most valuable companies in the world. Step 2, do the most good we can. That's a very sophisticated strategy you have going there for yourselves.
To be completely transparent, that wasn't in our very first pitch deck.
I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was.
We didn't get our first investor with that. But it was always bubbling away in the background. And I think all three of us as co-founders and lots of people who have joined us along the journey, we're creating a company that we want to work at. Like, we don't view, there's no playbook for building a company that we're following. We're building a company that we want to build and that we want other people to work at and come along on the mission with us. For me, that's driven by the past experiences I had, building my other very tiny business, working at Google. There was lots that I loved about working at Google. There was lots that I didn't quite like working at Google. And I wanted to fix that up as we're building Canva. Mel and Cliff have their own driving forces around what company they want to build. It just so happens that the three of us together agree on quite a lot of what that company should look like. And we always, for probably the first 4 years, we did it very intuitively. So we didn't write down our culture or our values. We had our mission. We obviously had our pitch decks and an idea of the product that we wanted to build. But it wasn't until about the 4th or 5th year that we actually started thinking about what the values of the company were and how to communicate those. We knew them in our heart, but we had never said them in words before. And we went through this whole process. The company was about 80 people at the time. We went and talked to everyone at Canva, asked them what was important to them, what they loved about working with their teammates, why they were passionate about the product, what impact they wanted to have, and we kind of distilled a bunch of values down from that. The first go at it, we had 12 values, which is a terrible idea. Like, if you can't count your values on the number of fingers you have, no chance anyone's going to remember them. But we tried it for six months. No one ever remembered them. I couldn't even remember them. And we went back to the drawing board, kind of refined it down, really asked what was important to us and what actually drove decisions at Canva. And we distilled it down into 6 values, which have not changed for the past 7 years now. And people constantly refer to them day to day when they're talking to their teammates, when they're making decisions. If they're weighing up this path or that path, they will go down the path which follows our values. One of those values is be a force for good, which really ties into that step 2 plan which you mentioned, and drives the real impact that we want to have in the world. So empowering users with design, as I said, can have really vast impacts. But lots of the other decisions we make about how we grow the company, how we spend the company's money, where we put our equity, like all those things can also have a massive impact, and that's what Be a Force for Good is about.
And I like that, but I also like there's a lot of people in like say more in the social area, especially in Europe, that don't think that these two parts can be combined, create a very valuable company and do good. A lot of people are worried of making money, earning money, creating value, and then they think these two don't go hand in hand. I'm assuming there's probably sometimes decisions you have to take where it's either doing this or that, I would think, where you go like, okay, we need to create the most value, or one of the most valuable companies in the world, and then do good. At least there's probably moments where you have to really challenge those values, I would think.
Surprisingly few. There are a couple where that's happened, but most of the time it's about opportunity. And if you pursue the path of most opportunity, it's win-win. Most of the business models in the world are made up. Like how much Spotify costs, how much Netflix costs,
totally.
how much people are willing to pay for things. Like you can make a lot of that up. How much a Gucci handbag costs is very different to what a no-name handbag costs. And that is all made up. So you can kind of determine what your business model is and communicate it and get your users to pay for things that they care about. And if you tell the story properly about the actual impact that they're having, you can have an amazing business that does both. And yeah, I think thinking about it as an opportunity, not as a cost, is key to that.
If we're talking about earning money, there's actually one audience question that I would like to bring in here, and that is, how did you actually scale from a free to a premium version of Canva? Because what were the biggest learnings when it comes to convincing people to pay for a free tool?
Yeah, so we did a couple of iterations of that. In the original pitch deck, the business model for Canva was images for $1, which was quite revolutionary at the time. There were lots of stock photo sites, and most of them you'd have to pay like $100 for a photo, $500, and you could only use that photo once for a very specific thing. We pitched not only stock photographers, but our investors and everyone else who's thinking about the business on using a photo in your design. And because we had the design tool itself, as well as the content, we knew where it was going to be used, we knew how many times you published it, we could control that. And that enabled us to get the cost down drastically. So you literally paid $1 when you went and published your design. And that was the original pitch. Lots of people loved that idea. It was like disruptive, it was very different, and we saw really pretty good growth on that for the first 2 years. I think most of the time for the first 2 years we had about 30% month-on-month revenue growth. But the vision always was to offer as much value in the product as possible, give it away for free, and have a slice of it that was a bit more feature-rich, that really offered an extra layer of value, and something that people would pay for. We didn't exactly know what that was for the first couple of years, but through putting the product out there, getting a few people to pay for those images, and then understanding what they wanted to do next. So what would make their lives easier? And we really zeroed in on small to medium businesses who wanted to focus on their brand. And we built a whole bunch of tools around using your brand, including your logo, your fonts, your colors, being able to easily resize posts from Twitter size to Instagram size, a whole bunch of features that really spoke to them. And we launched that subscription program about 2 years after we launched the very first product. But always it's a tenet now that we want to give as much value away for free as we can, because we want people to get the benefits of design. We don't want anyone not to be able to access to design. And it is an incredible growth driver. Being able to have anyone in the world use your product and then tell someone else about it is way better than any marketing dollar you can spend. Even to the extent that, tied in with being a force for good, we give the product, the actual paid product, away entirely for free to any teacher or student anywhere in the world. And we also give it away to any non-profit organization in the world. Because it delivers on that step 2 plan. It actually is a huge opportunity because it allow us to grow incredibly huge in the education space, and ties into this whole freemium model that has now been well trodden of like offering a free product, upselling people to a better product, and getting them to pay for it. 2 months after we launched our paid subscription product, the revenue from that totally blew our image revenue out of the water, and now it's the bulk of our revenue.
In a half sentence, you said you also can choose what you do with your equity. What does that mean? I'm kind of leading up to that. I've read somewhere that you've chosen to do something quite specific with that.
Yeah, so Mel and Cliff have chosen to put 30% of their equity into the Canva Foundation. I've partnered with my wife. We've put it into our own foundation that's focused on the environment. But each of us has chosen to pretty much put most of what we're earning towards that impact that we want to see in the world.
That's spectacular. Now, because what I find so intriguing is, like, I mean, let's be honest, Canva's worth a couple dollars, right? So if you Google it, there's like a long, big number. Yet you decide not to build a phallus-shaped rocket like other people. I mean, you're the designer. You can decide if it's phallus-shaped or not. And you give away a good, significant chunk of that potential building rockets and stuff for good. I mean, that's probably quite a thought process behind that.
I mean, he can do what he wants with his money, and he has a big vision, and it's not just about him. At least he hasn't spent it on a, I don't know, gold-filled swimming pool. Actually,
he probably has.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think for us, I feel incredibly fortunate to be in the position I am in, and you know, we haven't got a lot of liquidity. We don't have a lot of cash floating around, so it's still in the future. But most of what we have of Canva, most of what we own of Canva, we couldn't possibly use. So I feel a real, like it's both an opportunity and also a responsibility on my part to use that good fortune for other people and for the planet. So that's where we're thinking. For the next 40, 50 years, however long we're alive, what else is this value doing, and what is it generating, and how is it having a positive impact on the world?
What we haven't touched much is actually your investors, because in the end, being a venture case always has advantages and disadvantages. I mean, obviously the growth was probably also because you got some good funding there to spend it on growth. But I also read somewhere that already 2017 you were profitable. So maybe talk a bit more about this decision of going the venture direction, and also whether there was any point where your mission of doing good was somehow in conflict here. Was there ever a point where investors were against certain measures you took that went along with your mission?
Short answer to that second one is no. We've been incredibly fortunate with our investors who have been very aligned with our vision. We have been profitable for the last 6 years, and that actually came out of a situation where an investor screwed us over, and we didn't want to be beholden to that. Like, we didn't want to be in a position where someone else could dictate what the future of the company was. So from that moment, we clearly understood that being in a position where we would need to take money from someone and they could tell us what to do was not where we wanted to be. So we focused quite heavily on profitability from that stage. We've been really fortunate that some of our very early investors really got where we wanted to go. A lot of investors said no. Mel did an incredible amount of pitching. She probably got over 100 no's from investors who said that it was a dumb idea, it wasn't the right time, wasn't the right team, all sorts of things. And I'm sure you've been through it when you've been pitching for your idea. But when you find that right investor who does believe in what you're doing and how you're doing it and what your vision is, it's a really great partnership. We've got a fantastic investor who's pretty much been in every round of Canva since day one in Australia, called Blackbird. And they've been really great partners. They're both founders and finance people, so they really get us. And they've backed our vision, every aspect of it, from the way that we grow the product through the way that we grow the company, and also through to being a force for good in step 2. We've gone to them several times and said, we want to do this with our equity. So we we went into the Pledge 1% program, which is where you pledge 1% of your equity, 1% of your time, 1% of your product, and 1% of something else, I can't remember. And you pledge to give that away. And we went to them and they said, yeah, fine. You don't really need to ask us, but we're happy if you want to do that. And every time we've gone back to them with something like that, they've said yes. And that is because they see the value between step 1 and step 2, because creating more value lets us do more good, but doing that good is like a real beacon. It's a beacon to great people who want to work at a company that has positive impact, that thinks just beyond the software that they're building, and who want to be proud of where they work and what they tell their friends and their family they do every single day. So doing that good enables us to get more great people who build more value, and building that value lets us do more good, and it just keeps cycling.
I'm curious if you're like 90 or 100 or 120 years of age, whatever life has in store, and you're sitting on your porch, and kind of think back. What is it you like to see to say, well, yep, I think we did good?
I would like to see people who not just think they're creative, but know they're creative. That we have unlocked creativity for pretty much every person on the planet. Because a lot of people don't think they're creative, and that stops them from taking that idea to the next step, or it stops them from talking to someone else about something they want to do. And I think Canva is a real enabler of creativity and bringing creativity to every walk of life. So that's number 1. Number 2 is really using our philanthropic money, our foundation, to have an impact on that side of things. So that's education, poverty, the planet, and also local communities. They're the 4 pillars that we focus on. And for me personally, from a family perspective, we're very much invested in biodiversity and the environment. So seeing a planet that is thriving, that is not overrun with buildings and machines and humans, and it is us as people living with the natural world together in real harmony. That's where I want to be on my 120-year porch.
I like that. Now, you seem to be such a good guy. You have to have some kind of guilty pleasures. Come on, that's unfair. Like, you build this billion-dollar company, you're a good guy.
I eat an incredible amount of sugar.
There you go. There you go.
I also don't like beer, which is kind of sacrilegious in a place like Vienna, and also Prague, where I just was. So there's 2 things that's bad about me.
So you like sugar and don't like beer. Okay, well, that's a bombshell, but I mean...
I'm the same.
Yeah, he's totally for
hang
apple
out
juice. He loves apple juice the whole time. I'm half Irish, but I don't like beer as well that much, other than Guinness.
What a Guinness, yeah. Well,
yeah, Guinness, but that's something else. That's something else. That's holy. But I mean, okay, fair enough. Any other guilty pleasures you want to share? Like, do you bet on horses or something like that? Or sometimes push old ladies?
I hate betting. I can't... Yeah, when I talk to a tech person who works for a betting company, I'm like, what are you doing with your life? I don't know. I can't
Do you
think
sometimes
of another
park
vice.
in some place where you're not allowed to park? Do you speed something?
I think about 12 years ago, I might have parked in a disabled spot for 2 minutes.
And you... well... Yeah, there you go. Now we got that out of you. Well, that's something to write home about. And you kind of opened up the computer games illegally when you were a child.
Yes.
So we revealed... No, someone else revealed that. Okay, but we still have some questions to dig deep because we have a quick fire round coming up shortly.
Fire away.
Would you want to start with that, or would you want to do something else first?
First, I still want to quickly touch AI, because we've heard so much about it before. What's your view about the future of AI, both for the world, but also for Canva?
Yeah, I think there was great discussion before, and great to get those different perspectives on it from both people who are using it and people who are building it. I think the history of human evolution and innovation has always been leaps and bounds, and sometimes it requires breaking what was before or building on top of it. But every time it opens up new opportunity. And design is an area where that has happened quite pointedly. If you looked at how professional designers designed 100 years ago, it was very different to 50 years ago. Then they introduced Letraset, then they had desktop computers, then the web came along, then Canva came along, and now you've got AI coming along. And like that, all those things over centuries have changed design and changed what designers do. And I think it's the same for AI. It just shortens that distance that you need to take to get from your idea to reality, and opens up so much more opportunity for normal people as well as creatives. And I think creatives will figure it out. Like, creatives are creative. They don't want to be doing the same thing today that they're doing in 20 years. So they need to move with technology, and most of them love it. Like, they love trying out new things and seeing what they can do. And as Ali said before, like, what they've been able to do with generative AI tools has been incredible and just opens up a whole new world for them.
Out of interest, just to follow up on that, I mean, AI seems like a tremendous opportunity, yet we had Elon say, no, we need a half-a-year break, and it kind of seemed to scare him, or he was at least missing the business opportunity. Then in Europe, the traditional European responses to new technologies is, let's ban it. Ideally, let's ban it. Let's try and ban it again. The Italians banned it. Probably other countries were considering the same. So it seems to be a great opportunity, yet it seems to be scaring quite a few people. Then we have people like Sam Altman going around saying, I want to scan every single eyeball in the world. Yes, well, go for it. But what's your take on these kind of things when new technologies come up where potentially a large portion of the population is kind of scared?
That is technology, and that's innovation. Like, every single piece of technology that has ever been released has had people who point at the possible downfalls of it and people who embrace the opportunity. And history has shown that those who embrace the opportunity are the ones that get the benefit out of it. You saw exactly the same thing with music streaming. And I think law, like looking to legislation and law to figure out where we're heading as a society, is a pretty bad idea. Like, law is great at protecting us from a lot of things, but when you're looking at it for what the future of humanity and society is, it's always lagging. Law is reactive. It reacts to things that have happened. Law does not set where we're going. And in order to figure out what the law should be in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, you need to figure that out. The only way you figure that out is by experimenting and building with it.
You should talk to some people in the European Parliament, just saying. They're like, no, we have the exact law for this. We have it from 1729 that says this is what we do with artificial intelligence. No, I'm just kidding. Go on, Markus, do something smart.
I mean, just a quick follow-up on this, because you studied law, so you actually have quite a good insight there. Do you engage with politicians in Australia, maybe also broader than that, in bringing those two worlds together, because you understand the law perspective and you also understand the tech perspective?
I don't personally, but we have teams at Canva who are starting to do that. I think tech has probably been really bad at that. Like, tech is always just go out and build it and it'll figure it out. But there is a partnership you can have with politicians and with lawmakers, and I think it can be beneficial. But I think through my experience with law, like it also made me understand that law is not fixed. Just like language is not fixed. Language is constantly changing, and law is constantly changing. And what was legal or illegal yesterday can be legal or illegal tomorrow. It's just constantly evolving. But it is a lagging indicator. It has to react to things. It's not predictive.
I like that. It's fun. Now, you've seen a lot of challenges in your life. However, we have the greatest challenge ever coming at you. That's our quick fire round. It's highly sophisticated questions. You, sir, should be shitting yourself.
Okay, I'm strapping myself in.
Get ready. No, it's actually totally harmless. But still, we'll be quite interested to see how you answer them. Should I start with the procedures? Marvelous. So what's your greatest learning in life?
Oh, my greatest learning in life. How to make the best pancakes.
Tell us.
Good self-raising flour. You need to give it lots of love when you're beating it. You need the perfect quantity of eggs to flour. You need to get a lot of air in, make sure the air doesn't escape. And then you have to get it into the pan as quickly as possible before it deflates.
You've made me very hungry on that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you're into it, a bit of cocoa powder in pancakes goes amazingly.
That would be good evening. So you're a good DJ and you do that. Wow. Okay, good. And you're a
My
good person
daughter
as
actually
well.
made the cocoa discovery, so I can't lay claim to that one.
Wow.
Well, this would have qualified as a very good answer to our second question too, but I'll give you another chance for that. What's your best life hack?
My best life hack. Most emails go away if you just ignore them.
Plus one.
I can relate.
No, I think if it's important enough, it'll get to the top of your inbox again.
I love that.
That's a good learning for all of you out there. Follow up.
I'm with you on that one. Yes, I like that. What's the one book you'd advise our audience to read?
Ooh, that is tricky. I would say I'll go one fiction, one non-fiction. The non-fiction is Creativity Inc., which is a fantastic novel by Ed Catmull, who's one of the founders of Pixar. And it's an incredible book about bringing creativity and business, building a company, building a team together, and still maintaining the culture and what's important in your organization. So I highly recommend that book. For a fiction book, I would have to say Snow Crash, which is a seminal book by Neil Stephenson. And for me, it's probably sacrilegious, but it's better than Neuromancer, and it predicted so much more about the world we live in now.
More than The Simpsons?
Yeah, I reckon.
Okay.
Simpsons did it for like little meme stuff. Snow Crash did it for
That's
the
blasphemy.
entirety of society.
All right. Other than Canva, what's your favorite product?
My favorite product is Spotify. Well, depends if you want like super consumer product or like creative product. So probably my favorite product is Serato because I love DJing and it just lets me do amazing things. But Spotify for me is, I have a huge love for music, and Spotify gives me all of the world's music and helps me introduce my daughter to great techno, and just is an integral part of our lives.
Nice.
Thanks for that. I'm going to add a new question to our quick fire round. Who is the most inspiring person you've ever met?
It's a good one.
Most inspiring. This might be cheesy, but I'm going to say my wife. Just because she has shaped our lives in such a dramatic way. And Canva probably wouldn't be Canva without her, even though she worked for Canva for a brief moment very late on. So she wasn't part of any of the founding team, but she encouraged me to get back to Mellon Cliff when I was unsure what to do with my life. She enabled everything that happened through me being able to work in the office and travel and still raise a family. She encourages change in our life constantly, in where we live, how we think about the world, what our impact is. So she just increasingly is an inspiration and a driver for me, and still to this day makes me think even bigger.
Lovely answer. You're quite a likable person. Yeah, nice one. I'm sorry. I'm in a 12-year-old who's quite active. Do you want to do the proceedings
that's
on the
right
last one?
question for that. Final one. What's your favorite swear word?
My favorite swear word? I don't know. I don't get particularly inventive with my swear words. A good fuck always
And
goes
in good
a long
company
way.
here.
Yeah.
Well timed. Like, you can't just use it every 5 minutes. It needs to be out of the blue, totally unexpected, and just impeccable timing.
Nicely
nice.
delivered. Thank you very much for that, good sir. Yes, good. Now we've only 2 more questions to ask, and that's kind of our traditional way of ending this. And we kindly ask you to make a prediction. The prediction is quite straightforward. We say, yes, well, I'll say that happily on stage, totally going to happen. You can nail me down on that in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And a moonshot, just like the great JFK had his famous moonshot speech where he said, we'll bring someone to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard by the end of this decade.
All right, I'm going to make a prediction for 2 years. And the prediction is that an AI-generated song will win a Grammy within the next 2 years. It won't be like purely AI-generated, much to like kind of the discussion that we had before. Like, it's incredibly human-driven, but AI will play a role in this song becoming popular.
Love it.
What was the second question? Moonshot.
The moonshot.
This one's pretty easy, and again, it ties into my wife. So we've been thinking a lot about the impact we want to have, and she's actually dedicated, the rest of her life to this moonshot, and it is creating a better natural world. Biodiversity and the environment are incredibly important to the way that we live as humans, and enable the systems and the societies that we've set up, much to the lack of knowledge from most of us as to like how much the natural world supports us here in big cities. And there is a massive biodiversity crisis coming. A lot of people are focusing on climate, which is justified because it is a huge problem. But after we've solved climate, we could still live in a world that is ugly, that is bereft of nature and bereft of life, but has a great atmosphere. And biodiversity is that next wave that is coming. We're losing an incredible amount of species. The ecosystem services that we rely on, like clean air and water, and the soil that we grow stuff from is getting incredibly affected by the actions that we're taking as humans. And to fix this, we need an incredible amount of investment to go towards environment and biodiversity. Currently, about $50 billion annually around the world gets invested in the environment. We actually need over $1 trillion every single year being funneled towards nature positivity and biodiversity. And getting that finance switch to happen of trillions of dollars of traditionally, very, large institution finance swinging over towards biodiversity and environment is what needs to happen before 2030. That's what my wife is focused on, and she started an organization called Wedgetail, which is aiming to switch that financial channel over towards nature positive impact.
Boom, there you go. And that's a decent moonshot. Wow. Cameron Adams, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Great to share the stage
Thank
with
you
both
very
of you.
much.
Thanks a lot.
And I can see why they play a lot of Mozart in here. It's got great acoustics.
It has. You should bring your DJ set here, just saying. Yeah, and make some food. Anyhow, speaking of that, we also shouldn't forget our regular listeners who are also listening in, because this is not just a live, conversation on the stage. This is a podcast, so we'd also like to thank you, who's not here today, but you listening in. We'll also have to say that. Thank you very much for listening in. And, of course, if you're new to this whole thing, Markus and I release 2 episodes per week. Every Thursday is a news episode, and every Sunday, we have a so-called deep dive. However, die meisten sind auf Deutsch. Das heißt, da müsst ihr auch darauf vorbereitet sein. Wenn ihr ganz neu seid, die meisten, wie gesagt, Deutsch. Sometimes we also do this in English. In that sense, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, wherever you are, very much for listening to us. Thank you very much for being here. And in that sense, pleasure. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. And drinks and food, I hear. Not you at home. That sucks to be you. However...
Well, they can go to the kitchen and grab something from the fridge.
Yeah, go to the kitchen, grab something from the fridge. However, if it's 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday when you're listening to a deep dive, don't drink. Be responsible. Don't do that. Whatever. Anyhow, in that sense, thank you very much. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. And let's have some drinks and food. It's been a pleasure.